بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاك الله خير أخي محمد. In order to understand the significance of Jerusalem in the context of the struggle in and on Palestine, we first have to understand the nature of the Zionist project in Palestine. The Zionist project in Palestine is not merely limited to a traditional military occupation, nor is it only a form or a simple form of apartheid as the one that existed in South Africa. It is far more complicated. The Zionist project in Palestine is a combination of religious, historical narratives mixed with a traditional colonial enterprise and a form of apartheid as we've seen it in South Africa. But the emphasis here should be on the historical and religious narratives, claims, and symbols that this project came and tried to advance. Now, within this framework, there are issues that are defined by symbols. Bayt al-Maqdis, and I'm using the concept of Bayt al-Maqdis deliberately here because that's how it's known in our history, in our Islamic traditions, which is Jerusalem, Al-Quds. Most notably, Al-Haram al-Sharif, which they refer to as the Temple Mount, is the intensification. Now, Bayt al-Maqdis, Jerusalem, is the intensification of the civilizational conceptualization and of the conflict and the contention over history. It is the hub of the clash of narratives of the narratives of the two sides, and the aim of the forged Zionist ideology is to try to rewrite the history of Palestine and Jerusalem by Judaizing that history. By Judaizing that history. This is the main aim of this Zionist project, is to try to Judaize the history of Palestine and the history of Jerusalem. No one should dismiss the significance of these attempts. The reason why they erased over 425 Palestinian villages is to try to erase the history of Palestine and the Palestinians. The reason why they're changing the names of many cities within Palestine according to biblical names like Urshalim, Al-Quds, like Al-Khalil, Hebron, the reason why they're doing this is to not to only erase our memory, but also to Judaize this memory. And it doesn't end there. Even the theft of our heritage and our food. The hummus and falafel. Recently, za'atar. And they also dared to step on Dr. Hatim's toes, since he's from Nablus, by claiming knafa to be part of their heritage. What they're trying to do, I know it's maybe a laughable issue, but we should not take it lightly. Because what they're trying to do is to create a trail of history in Palestine from almost none. So our heritage is converted to be their heritage. Our history is converted to be a Zionist history or a Zionist forged history. Because I don't see this as a Jewish history, and we have our friends, our rabbis, and our friend Rabbi Wise and our other friend. They can tell you more about this and tell you where Judaism stands in relation to the Zionist project. They can tell you where it stands to this, because the Zionist project, not only that it tries to forge the history of Palestine, but also it hijacked Judaism. And we should be very clear about this. By extension, creating a false Zionist historical and religious narratives, it's a deliberate attempt to deny the indigenous people of Palestine, us, from their rights in their own land. And Jerusalem is the bedrock to forge and falsify the history of Palestine and Judaizing it. Now, if you go to the Old Testament, the Old Testament refers to the land of Palestine as the land of Canaanites. It refers to the inhabitants as the Philistines, right? It refers to it as the land of Canaanites. But this Zionist ideology is trying again to forge this history and to create a history again from none. Even Abraham was referred to as a stranger in the land of Canaanites. He wasn't there. The Hebrews didn't migrate there until it was maybe many decades or centuries after the Canaanites there. And even the Hebrews, according to many anthropological studies, are most likely a branch of the Canaanites. And of them are the children of Israel. This is according to some arguments. If you read Arthur Koestler, who is a Jewish historian who wrote the 13th tribe, he will tell you that the current children of Israel, or the majority of them, are not of the indigenous children of Israel. They converted to Judaism in the 13th century. And they migrated from Eastern Russia to Eastern Europe. Shlomo Sand, another Jewish historian, talks about the invented people. It doesn't mean that there are no Jewish people. It doesn't mean that there are no indigenous Israelites. The issue is that there is this attempt to create something out of something that is exaggerated. This attempt to hijack the history of Palestine and to erase the history of the indigenous inhabitants in the name of a religion. I will give you a few examples. In his memoirs, Chaim Weizmann, who was one of the leaders of the Zionist organization and was the first Israeli president after Israel was established in 1948, he talks of a meeting that he had with Arthur Balfour in 1906. Arthur Balfour was at the time the Prime Minister of Britain, and then he became the Foreign Minister when he gave that proclamation, Wa'ad Balfour, or the Promise of Balfour, the Declaration of Balfour Declaration. He had a meeting with him. Balfour tried to convince him of having a Jewish homeland in Uganda. Weizmann refused, and his argument was, as he registers it, that Zionism is a national political movement with a spiritual component. And this component, unless it's satisfied, it will not be successful. And in order to satisfy this component, the spiritual component, and to satisfy the spiritual component for the Jewish people, Palestine is the only place for that. That's the only place that they can establish some sort of a connection. So Palestine was on the map and was considered from day one. On September 13, 1993, and I think everyone knows why I'm referring to September 13, 1993. That's the day Ishaq Rabin, the late Israeli Prime Minister, signed with Yasser Arafat, the late Palestinian president, the Oslo Accords in Washington, D.C. I want you to listen to one of his statements. We have come, this is what Rabin said, we have come from Jerusalem, the ancient and eternal capital of Israel. This is a deliberate attempt to keep hammering this issue, that they have established roots in Palestine and in Jerusalem, creating again a history that did not exist, but for a short period of time, many centuries back. So they are trying to create this theme and this forged history in Palestine. In 2011, in his speech before the United Nations General Assembly, 2011, September 2011, the current Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, lashed out against those who say that Jerusalem is not the eternal capital of Israel, by claiming that it is accusing us, the Jews, the state of Israel, by trying to Judaize Jerusalem. It is as accusing the American of Americanizing Washington, or the British of trying to Anglicizing London. So again, he's trying to create this false impression and this false premise that this is our land, we have existed there for many millennia. Again, he tried to create this connection. If Washington, D.C. is not the capital of America, and if you can accuse the Americans of Americanizing Washington, then you can accuse us of Judaizing Jerusalem. If you can accuse the British of Anglicizing London, then you can accuse us of Judaizing Jerusalem. And he continues to tell us of a story, a fake story, of an ancient small ring that was found under one of the walls of Jerusalem, as he claims. And this ring has a name inscripted. Remember, he's talking to the world leaders in 2011 before the UN General Assembly. He's not talking to his base. He's talking to world leaders. Again, they're trying this deliberate advancement of a false narrative. He's talking to them, telling them about a small ring in his office that was found under one of the ancient walls of Jerusalem, old Jerusalem. And the name, and the ring has a name inscripted on it. And the name is, guess what? Netanyahu. And then he tells us about the history of his name. And the history of his first name, Benjamin, Benjamin, the son of Jacob, who's also known as Israel. That's what he tells. This is the story he tells. And then he establishes a connection. The reason why we're called Jews is because we roamed the hills of Judea and Samaria 4,000 years ago. And this presence has been continuous since then. So again, it is creating this forged history to claim ownership of the land of Palestine. Now, unfortunately, this forged history that many of us take lightly, okay, it's just a lie, it doesn't mean anything. Unfortunately, you have 25%, almost 25% of the American population who believe in it. I'm talking about the evangelicals, who make about 25% of the population in the United States. 80% of them, 80% of white evangelicals voted for Donald Trump. If you want to understand why Donald Trump signed or declared Jerusalem the eternal capital of Israel, then you have to understand who's his base is. 25% of the American people are evangelicals. 80% of the whites among them voted for Donald Trump. They kept lobbying the White House to declare Jerusalem the capital of the state of Israel and to move the embassy. Now, for the evangelicals, it's not a political matter. It is a fulfillment of a prophecy. The prophecy of the end of days. The return of Christ. And then the Jews have to accept him as their savior. And by contrast, we don't focus much on our connection to the land of Palestine and to Jerusalem. We don't talk much about what it really means for us as Muslims, not only as Palestinians, because they're using or hijacking the Jewish identity. We don't talk what it means to us, and everyone knows what it means to us. Not only the land of the first Qibla, not only the land of the second mosque, not only the land of Al-Isra and Al-Mi'raj, the night journey and the ascension to the seven heavens, and the blessed land as it's referred to in the Quran. It means more than that to us because, again, it projects our collective identity as a Muslim ummah because we're connected to that land. We're connected to the first Qibla. We're connected to the issue of imamah. We're connected to the issue of inheritance of all of the prophets before Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I know that this is an Islamic narrative, but again, we have to cultivate this narrative because it represents all of us. And then there is the political aspect into this debate. Yeah, the historical aspect. Who was there first? This is another argument. And there is the legal aspect or argument into this debate. There is the political argument. There is the argument of what is taking place on the ground, what Israel represents as a colonial enterprise. But we should not forget about what Palestine and what Jerusalem mean to all of us as Muslims too. We should not forget about that. Because you will have one of the pieces of your argument missing. Their argument is compounded. It's not a simple argument. It's not only historical because they know that they weren't there first. They know that Ibrahim immigrated to Palestine, alayhi salatu wassalam. Of course, for us, if you'll take it as a religious argument, we'll say Ibrahim is our prophet, but this is not the issue now. Now you have to compound your argument. And we have to speak about what Palestine means to us. So now they were able to infiltrate the evangelical doctrine here and to have the majority of them to believe that in order to fulfill the prophecy and the end of days and the return of Christ, you have to have Jerusalem as the capital of the state of Israel, and Israel has to defeat all of its enemies in the region. We have to work on our argument. But it wasn't just because the evangelicals believe in this prophecy. The evangelicals supported George W. Bush, but he did not declare Jerusalem the capital of the state of Israel. He kept signing the waiver every 6 months, not to move the embassy. There is a reason. There were political considerations. Everyone knows that this was a reckless move by Donald Trump, but this is not the issue. What I want every one of us to understand is the reason why Donald Trump signed this. There are minor reasons, but the major reason is that the Israeli lobby in this country worked hard and they earned it. They earned it. When Donald Trump declared in his speech before AIPAC in March 2016, when he announced or he declared Jerusalem or made a promise that if he becomes the president of the United States, if he is elected to office, he will move the embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, as he put it, Jerusalem. When he made that promise, Sheldon Adelson, who's one of the Zionist Jewish wealthiest people in this country, the owner of a chain of casinos in this country, gave $20 million to one of the political actions that is supporting Donald Trump at the time. When Donald Trump became the nominee of the Republican Party, Adelson paid $1.5 million to organize the National Republican Convention. And Adelson kept hammering the White House to declare Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and to move the embassy. He was very upset with the White House when Trump signed the first waiver in June 2017. He kept calling, they kept the pressure until they were successful to convince this man to go against the advice of his principals within his national security team. He went against their advice. So it didn't come out of vacuum. They didn't only focus on one aspect, a religious or a historical or a political aspect. They worked on all fronts. And this now comes to us. What do we do? It's good to educate ourselves. It is good to mobilize. Yes, we need to educate ourselves and we need to mobilize, but also we need to organize in this country. You know, one of the things that I cannot understand and I don't think anyone should accept is that we usually project failure, and based on this projection, we decide not to do anything. So we decide it's impossible to achieve prominence in this country. We decide it's impossible to go against Islamophobia and to go against Zionism in this country. We make that false projection and then we become passive. We do nothing. When you go to communities and tell them you need to educate, okay, where is this going to take us? You need to mobilize, well, it's a waste of time. You need to organize, we're not going to achieve anything. First, that's not the story of mankind. Two, that is not our religion. You need to start from some point. They didn't achieve prominence in this country, and I'm talking about the Zionist lobby in this country. They didn't achieve prominence overnight. They've worked hard for it and they earned it. Yes, the odds are stacked against us, but it doesn't mean that we abandon our work for Palestine and our work for justice. Not only our just cause in Palestine, many other causes of justice, whether here internally, domestically, or foreign plights that we have. But we have to continue the hard work. So I will tell you that we need, yes, to educate our children about what Palestine means, what Jerusalem means to us or for us. Also, we need to mobilize our community to advocate on behalf of Palestine. When you meet with your representatives, with your senators, with their staffers, make sure that you bring the issue of Palestine and the issue of Jerusalem to the discussion. Make sure that they hear from you. It takes time, but with time we'll build this power. When you read an article, make sure that you send a comment. Always make sure that you do something. Also, organize events for Palestine. In your masjid, I don't know how many of you come from different communities. Your masajid in your areas, how many masjid did organize events for Palestine? Educational events. How many masajid? Did you bring a speaker to speak about Palestine and Jerusalem? Did you hold an event to your youth? Did you try to hold an event at a church or a community center to speak about Palestine and Jerusalem? If we don't do this, then we cannot build this power and this influence that we're looking for. We have to do this. And I will urge all of you to go to our website, the American Muslims for Palestine, ampalestine.org. Go to our website. When we put the petition out to go to the White House before Donald Trump announced his decision to move the embassy or to start the preparation to move the embassy and to declare Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, we had a few thousand signing the petition, while at least hundreds of thousands should have signed that petition. It went directly to the White House. If they don't hear your voices, then we don't have that much influence. Only about 900 people used our talking points. I don't think this is going to help our cause. So if you really care, I will ask you not only to volunteer with AMP or to invite us to your communities to speak about Palestine and to try to help you to organize and mobilize for Palestine, but also I will ask you to be part of this effort. To be part of this effort. Without this, I will ask you, what future are we leaving for our children? Our children will blame us that we did not do what we should have done 20 years ago. So you have to do the work of today, so in 20 years from now, they will have a platform to start from, not to start from scratch. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.